Hello guys. Okay, so the last time we had our discussion, which is on the part 3 on about the voices of verbs, which are the active and the passive. So I presented to you the 12 patterns of your tenses of verbs. So there are actually 12 tenses. As you can see on the board, we have the present simple, active, and the passive, the present continuous, the active and the passive, the present perfect, active and passive. And again, if you could remember what I told you the last time, that perfect continuous tenses, particularly we have the present perfect continuous, the past perfect continuous, and the future perfect continuous. These three tenses don't have actually the passive form of the verb. That's why in this case we usually use only the active voice. The same thing with the past. Again, we have the active and the passive, the past continuous, the active and the passive, the past perfect, active and the passive. Again, we have the future simple, active and passive, the future continuous, the active and the passive voice, future perfect, the active and the passive voice. So again, I repeat, the last time we had a discussion on the voices of verbs, I presented to you on the part 3 of the video regarding the patterns of your 12 tenses. Okay, so now on this part 4, I will be making an example. I will be presenting to you one example, and we will try to change with all the tenses of the verb. We will just use one example and how we change active to passive. Okay, so I will have here my board here. So again, guys, remember that if we do want to change an active statement into its passive form, there must be an object. It could be a direct object. You have we have the two objects. We have the indirect and the direct object, or you can have the pattern as the video OC, so which is your subject, transitive verb, direct object, and the object complement. Okay, so with these patterns, guys, we will be following these patterns, and I will be making examples on my other small board. Okay, so please bear with me. Okay, let's have the present simple. So again, the pattern is if the subject is singular, you put s or es. If it's plural, use the base form. And then the passive form, we have the subject plus am is are plus the past participle. So how do we say that? Let's say, for example, here, Mr. Tan teaches the students. So that is the active form of present simple. How do we change that into passive? So again, this is the object, the students here, guys. So we could use your object as the subject in the passive form. So you can say the students. Okay. So in the pattern, what should we use? It am, is, are. So the students are what? Taught. So the pattern is am, is, are plus what? Past participle. So we can say the students, okay, the students are taught. So that is present simple, active, and passive. Okay, now let's have the present continuous. So again, what is the pattern for present continuous active? We can use your subject plus am, is, are plus the ing, or the present participle form of the verb. And look at this. Let's try to change this present simple into its present continuous, so it would become like this. You can say Mr. Tan. Is it am, is, are? Then we use is. Then we change this main verb here into its present participle. You can say Mr. Tan is teaching the students. So from present simple active, we change into present continuous active. Now we change again into present continuous passive. And look at the pattern on part 3. The pattern is subject plus am, is, are plus being plus the past participle. So it would become like this. The students, am, is, are. The students are being what? Taught. So that is the passive of what? Present continuous. Now let's go to the next tense. That is your what? Present perfect. So what is the pattern for present perfect active? We have the subject plus has or have plus the past participle. So we can say Mr. Tan, so has what? Mr. Tan has taught the what? Students. And how do we change that into passive? So we use again the students, okay? Has or have. The students have what? Been taught. Okay. And that is the pattern for present perfect. Okay. How do we change this again, teacher, into present perfect continuous? Okay. So again, when you talk about your present perfect continuous, this is only what? Active, right? So how do we say that? Mr. Tan has been teaching the students, and we don't have the passive form. So now let's change this one into past simple. Okay, so for past simple, so what is the pattern? We have to use the main verb is in its past form of verb. So Mr. Tan teaches the students to change that into past simple. It becomes, for the active, Mr. Tan taught the students. If we change that into passive, what's the pattern? Subject plus was, were plus the past participle. So how do we change that? It would become the students were taught. Okay, so that is the passive form of your what? Past simple. So is it clear, guys? Okay, now let's change it into its past continuous form. So again, what is the pattern for past continuous? We can have your what? Subject plus was, were plus ing in the active. So it becomes Mr. Tan was what? Teaching the students. And how do we change that into its passive form? It becomes the students were, okay, the students were being what? Taught. Because the pattern of past continuous is we have your what? Was, were, being plus the past participle. Now let's change it into your past perfect. So what is the pattern in your past perfect? For the active, had PP. For the past participle, had been PP. So if you change that, Mr. Tan had taught the students. And how do you change that into passive? The students had been what? Had been taught. So that is the past perfect active and passive. Now let's change it into your past perfect continuous. Again, for this past perfect continuous, we only use the active form. So had been ing. So you can say Mr. Tan had been. Okay. Mr. Tan had been teaching the students. Okay, guys, let's go to future simple. So future simple, the active form is will plus base form. So you can say Mr. Tan will teach the students. Okay. How do we change that into passive? The students will be what? Taught. Okay, so again, future simple, will or shall plus the base form. The passive is will or shall plus be plus the past participle. Now we have the continuous tense. So how do we say that? Mr. Tan will be what? Will be teaching the students. So how do we change that into passive? The students will be being what? Taught. So the pattern for that is for the present continuous, as you notice, is ing. For the past continuous, as you notice, was ing. For the future continuous, will be ing. And then the passive of future continuous is will be being plus pp. Okay, now let's have the future perfect. The pattern is will have pp for the active, and for the passive is will have plus the pp. So you can say Mr. Tan will have taught the students. Okay, so will have taught, so will have pp. And then how do we change that into passive? So it becomes the students will have been what? Taught. So that is the passive form of your future perfect. Now, the last one is we have the future perfect continuous. Again, this is only an active form. So it would be Mr. Tan will have been teaching the students. So guys, this is now the complete patterns when it comes to the 12 tenses of verbs. So again, these are the patterns. For present simple, active is S or ES. The passive is no S or ES. So for the passive, subject plus M is R plus the past participle. For the present continuous again, M is R ing is the passive. M is R being PP is the passive. For the present perfect, has have plus PP. The passive has have been plus the PP. For the present perfect continuous, have been ing. For the past simple, for the active, we just use the past form of the verb. For the passive, we have the was verb plus the past participle. For the past continuous, again for the active, subject was verb plus the ing. For the passive, was verb being plus pp. For the past perfect, we have the had plus pp for the active. And for the passive, we have the had been pp. For the past perfect continuous, again, we have the had been plus what? Ing. For the future simple, we have the will shall plus the base form. For the passive, will shall be plus past participle. For the future continuous, will or shall plus be plus ing. For the passive, will shall be being plus the past participle. For the future perfect, will shall have plus the past participle. For the passive, will shall have been plus the past participle. For the future perfect continuous, will shall have been plus the present participle. So guys, you just try only to follow the pattern and how to make an active and passive for the 12 tenses of verbs. And again, I repeat, for the perfect continuous, we have the present, the past, and the future. There are no passive form. That's why I made an example for each of the pattern. So let's try to recap. Mr. Tan teaches the students. The students are taught. That is present simple. For the present continuous, Mr. Tan is teaching the students. Change into passive, the students are being taught. For the present perfect, Mr. Tan has taught the students. For the passive, the students have been taught. For the present perfect continuous, again, this is only active, so Mr. Tan has been teaching. For the past simple, we use the past form. Mr. Tan taught the students. Change it into passive, the students were taught. For the past continuous, Mr. Tan was teaching the students. The passive, the students were being taught. For the past perfect, we change it into Mr. Tan had taught the students. For the passive, the students had been taught. For the past perfect continuous, Mr. Tan had been teaching. For the future simple, Mr. Tan will teach the students. For the passive, the students will be taught. For the future continuous, Mr. Tan will be teaching the students. The passive is, the students will be being taught. Future perfect, Mr. Tan will have taught the students. The passive, the students will have been taught. And the future perfect continuous, Mr. Tan will have been teaching. So guys, this is now the complete patterns of the 12 tenses and then the example I made. If you notice guys here, look at this. For the present simple active, if the singular, we use singular subject, so we use S or ES in the verb, so I put here teaches. So Mr. Tan teaches the students. Okay, I want to change this one into passive. So again, the object will become the subject, so the students. So M is R. Is my subject singular or plural? It's plural, so I chose R. I used R here. Then the past participle of teaches is taught. So the students are taught. So it's like that, guys. Here, present continuous. What's the pattern? We have the subject plus M is R plus the ing. So I put here Mr. Tan. Is it M is R? It's is plus the ing form or the present participle form of the verb. I change it. Mr. Tan is teaching the students. Then again, I change it into passive. What's the pattern? M is R being plus what? Past participle. So I put here Mr. Tan. Is it M is R? It's is teaching the students. Change into passive. The object, the students. Is it M is R? So students is plural, so R plus being plus PP. The students are being taught. So you follow this, and then you can change one sentence into using your 12 tenses of verbs. So guys, in this case, it is very important for you to know them. So my question is, do you use all the 12 tenses when you do speaking? Do you really know what's the meaning of each tense? Then that is for us to study in the future. But for now, what is important now is we do have to memorize the patterns. Again, so I do apologize because my board is too small. So, but don't you worry. If I can go out, I can buy bigger. I can buy a bigger board for everybody. But for now, if you cannot read my writing, you just try to follow my voice. And if I do speak hard, you just try to pause the video. And I hope you have finished your lecture. You had your pen and paper while I was teaching, so at least you could have complete notes for now. Okay, so again, this is the part 4 of the introduction of your what? Tenses of verbs. So the next part will be, I will be teaching you the patterns on how to create on active and passive sentences when it comes to your modals. Okay, so anyway, modals are just so simple. We just simply follow certain rules for that. So is this clear, guys? Okay, so I'll see you on my next video. Okay, so don't forget to subscribe again. Okay, again, this is Teacher Christoph saying we can make grammar easy. Okay, so have a good day.